Every one of us uses prescription drugs at some time in our life. We take it on trust that these pills are safe. But are they?
The suicidal thoughts only happen while I was taking the drug. They've never happened before or after.
Some of the most influential names in medicine are now asking if we're being told the truth about the pills that we take.
It has serious implications for the whole of psychiatry. It has serious implications for the whole of medicine.
For more than 2 years, Panorama has been investigating your concerns about SEROXAT, one of the world's most controversial drugs.
I'd never thought about suicide before I took SEROXAT, and when I was taking it, I was obsessed about death. It was part of my everyday life.
What you've been telling us has exposed major failings in this country's system of medicines regulation.
They failed miserably, and they caused a huge amount of distress because they did.
This man has been inside the secret world of the medicines regulator. He found that for years it missed crucial safety evidence on SEROXAT, a failure which must raise concerns about other medicines we take.
I have little confidence that the drugs they're licensing day by day are being licensed in a way that I would feel appropriate. And what's even more concerning, I have very little confidence in drugs that have been regulated in the past.
I think in due course we may look at all of this and think that this was one of the biggest medical scandals ever.
Now the regulator's handling of one drug calls into question whether prescription medicines should be taken on trust. This dreary office block in South London is home to a very important government agency, the Medicines Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or MHRA. You've probably never heard of them. They're a kind of pill police.
The primary role of the MHRA is to protect the public health. It also has got a responsibility to ensure that only drugs which are effective and safe come to the market and remain on the market.
The MHRA maintains it's one of the finest regulators in the world. But that boast has been seriously undermined by your complaints about SEROXAT. It's one of the most widely prescribed antidepressants in the UK and was licensed by the regulator 13 years ago. Over the course of 2 years, Panorama has investigated your complaints and uncovered evidence that SEROXAT can cause aggression.
I started thinking that everybody was out to get me. I started to feel angry and murderous. I wanted to kill my partner and my family. I've never felt like that before. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my knees up against me because I knew that if I moved, I would kill everybody.
Evidence it can cause suicide.
My father was on SEROXAT for 4 days. On the 4th day of taking them, he was in possession of a hunting gun, and he went to a local wood and shot himself.
Evidence it can harm children.
When I was on the tablets, I did self-harm. I would use any sharp thing like scissors, knife, and I'll just put the point to my arms and just scrape until it bled.
And evidence it can leave you hooked.
I came home for Christmas one year and forgot to take my drugs with me, and within a day of not having SEROXAT, I was going absolutely berserk. I was threatening to drive 100 miles back home to get a pill to take it. I was driving around pharmacies begging them to give me a packet of SEROXAT.
SEROXAT is one of a group of antidepressants known as SSRIs, which got the regulator's seal of approval in the early 90s. They're marketed to treat all sorts of anxiety, stress and depression, and they've helped millions of people. But they're also hugely controversial. 5 times the regulator has reviewed the safety of these drugs. 5 times they've been given a clean bill of health. But in the case of SEROXAT, each time the regulator got it wrong, failing to spot crucial safety information, some of which has been under its nose for 13 years. It's a story that raises serious questions about the system of medicines regulation in this country.
The worst, I personally feel, was when I attacked my daughter. I held her head in my hands and I was hitting her head on the floor over and over again.
I told him explicitly about the dreams I was having, and he just started to laugh. So I said to him, "Doctor, I don't find this very funny because I'm dreaming about murdering children."
This wider picture has only now become clear because this man, the head of Britain's largest mental health charity, took a unique 9-month journey into the heart of the regulatory system.
I was bringing the consumer voice right to the heart of drug regulation, really, and the SEROXAT issue. I think I was quite open-minded in the early days about what would happen. I was very hopeful that my inclusion might actually make a real difference, make a real change.
Richard Brooke was invited to sit on a 6th safety review of the SSRIs. It's become known as the Expert Working Group. The government ordered it to be set up in April last year in response to mounting controversy about the drugs. Richard Brooke was the first patient's representative ever to sit on one of these reviews. It gave him access to a world that's protected from scrutiny by draconian secrecy laws. A world, he says, where patients' interests come last.
I think they've been totally let down, really, by the regulator. That should be the most important thing here. I mean, at the end of the day, it's we're taking the medicine. It should be the most important thing, and it's the least important thing. They're bottom of the list.
One of the first things Richard Brooke discovered was how the MHRA had failed to protect some of the most vulnerable patients of all: children. Sarah Thompson was one of nearly 24 children who contacted us after our programme in October 2002. She was just 16 when she was prescribed SEROXAT for depression. Until then, she'd never been suicidal or self-harmed.
I would cut myself mainly, and then I started to burn myself and found other methods, but it was mainly cut myself to start with.
And this was within the first week of taking SEROXAT?
Yeah, it was the very first week I took SEROXAT.
Had you ever done anything like that before?
No, I'd never even thought about it. It's not something that had crossed my mind until I started taking it.
At the very first meeting of the Expert Working Group last summer, Richard Brooke was shown confidential clinical trial data from the manufacturers of SEROXAT, GlaxoSmithKline, the results of extensive testing of the drug in under-18s from years earlier. It appears this was the first time the regulator had ever investigated whether SEROXAT was safe for children, in spite of the evidence previously uncovered by Panorama. Was there any evidence that the regulator had been concerned about the effects of SEROXAT in children?
No, not as far as I'm aware. I mean, they'd had all these reviews through the 90s, and as far as I know, they'd always given the drug a clean bill of health for adults, and although it's not licensed for children, I mean, they knew it was being used from the data they had. It was being used in children. It was never causing an issue for them.
Most medicines are only licensed to treat adults, but there's nothing to stop doctors prescribing them to children. The MHRA knew many thousands of children were being prescribed SEROXAT and that concerns were being voiced about the drug. Yet it didn't ask GlaxoSmithKline to provide evidence that SEROXAT was safe for under-18s. This failure turned out to be disastrous for teenagers like Sarah Thompson.
I did attempt suicide. I attempted to slit my wrists and take an overdose, so it did get very bad. I'd never thought about suicide before I took SEROXAT, and when I was taking it, I was obsessed about death. It was part of my everyday life.
In April last year, we put these claims to GlaxoSmithKline. Their defence of SEROXAT was robust.